Hello there. Welcome to episode 1 of whatever I wind up calling this podcast. So, my name is Will. Today I want to discuss Canadian literacy and how we seem to have an extremely high rate of literacy. Everyone can read, but the depth at which they read in this country, Canadian citizens, immigrants, anybody living here, the depth is not great. It's really quite shallow. I've noticed that even among the more intelligent people that I know, which, keep in mind, is not a very large amount of people, I am uneducated myself. The position that I work in attracts a lot of uneducated people. It's perfectly fair to assume that I have a serious bias when it comes to evaluating how illiterate people are around me. And when I say illiterate, I'm no longer talking about rates of being able to read in English. I'm referring to, for the rest of this episode, I'm referring to having actually read more than a couple of subjects, serious subjects, having read to the point of understanding more than a couple of serious subjects. So I should really define that better. Let's see. I think I would define it more accurately as being well read enough to confidently speak on a complicated subject. We don't have a lot of those. We have a lot of people who will speak with very, very low level talking points. Their vocabularies are sparse, devoid of any real precise language. Language is used incredibly imprecisely. Constantly, people are misusing words. I mean, I do it too. I need to work on this myself. I have plenty of progress to make in terms of my own literacy. But what I encounter frequently is people who have no understanding of the concept that they're trying to discuss, no formal training in that field, and really just no interest in improving either. The most interesting conversations I've had on so many of these subjects actually come out of people who have just talked about these things a lot. They don't bother to stand on the shoulders of giants so much as they just like to discuss things with people and come to understand subjects based on, the verbal battles they've had regarding those subjects, right? Like when you talk about abortion in Canada, for example, what you get in those discussions, you get a lot of talking points. You don't get any kind of theory, you don't get any kind of historical references or anything that shows that a person has actually taken the time to sit down with a subject, write down that subject, read about it, research it, and then try to form their own opinion. What you get instead is the most basic arguments. You get the most basic surface level conjecture. Am I even using that word properly? I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. When I think of conjecture, I guess I can't define it precisely, but what I'm thinking of is a statement being made about a specific thing that is not particularly well placed. That's how I would define that if I were to just come up with it. So, you find that frequently. You find a lot of people who all they really have to talk about is conjecture, and all they ever spar against because of this severe lack of literacy in Canada is conjecture. And you wind up with people who can't argue at any level of depth that actually would change someone else's mind. You just have a lot of individuals that they're ineffective. We it's sort of funny to go out and speak with Canadians about any kind of political topic for this reason, because you can talk all day with someone, and not only are they not used to having their mind changed to the point that they will never, essentially never admit that they're wrong within the conversation that they discover that they're wrong, which of course I'm guilty of myself. I think everyone does that, but to the degree that it happens here, I don't think so. That's a Canadian thing for us. It's our problem. But they are also completely unable to form the opinions required to actually change someone else's mind, even if they were conducive to that, even if they were someone who is open to having their mind changed. I've so seldom come across an individual who, even when they are making their argument in an eloquent fashion, they're actually trying to be respectful and discuss in an open manner. They take my point seriously, I'm taking their point seriously. It's very seldom will you, if you have any kind of understanding of the topic, be convinced to change your mind, because all you're hearing are the same talking points that you heard along the way to forming your current opinion on that topic. So you're sort of just stuck in a pit, and you can't really go anywhere. You have no tools to take you out of that pit unless you drag yourself out and sit down and take a very serious think and spend a huge amount of time reading. And the really threatening part of this, the really awful thing about it, is that even if you do go and sit down and do the hard work yourself and figure out the complexities of any given subject, especially, the political battles of our day, you're still living in a country where essentially nobody understands these subjects to any kind of degree that would actually help. It's not worth it. I don't know how to describe it really. You can go and master a subject and have amazing talking points yourself that nobody around you has ever heard before, and go into a conversation and get absolutely nothing out of it. And even in our public discourse, I'm not sure if it would have this same effect, but I have a feeling that even if a politician were to come out tomorrow and have taught himself or herself this, beautiful mastery of whatever political point they're going on about that day, it wouldn't matter, because Canadians are not receptive. They're not exposed to ideas enough, and they're so distracted. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, phone bad. And I don't want to pull I don't even want to generalize and say, oh, it's a boomer thing. It's an everyone thing at this point. Everyone recognizes that you lose an amount of your attention span when you are focused on technology constantly. But on the flip side of this, I have noticed a trend recently. There are more people who, for whatever reason, and I'll go over the reasons in a minute, seem to be focusing on opening their minds. They don't know how, they don't have the tools to do so, they don't have the experience required to do so, to have an open mind. But there appear to be people who are they just desire to have an open mind. And I think it might be that conditions in Canada are becoming a little bit worse. Life is getting a little bit worse. It's such a beautiful life we have here. It's such a wonderful thing that we're all very grateful for. But it is being slowly corrupted, and there are serious problems. There's cracks forming. And I think that there are a lot of people who are receptive to that, and they sort of instinctually feel a desire to open their mind and try to understand, well, what's going on here? Because, quoting the individual sort of mentally here, what's going on here? I look around and I see, well, everything is similar. Nothing has really changed. There's no massive change in this country, except for perhaps demographics, which of course that's a huge change that's been going on. But ignoring that, and no one can blame all of Canadians' problems on a demographic shift. I mean, it's definitely caused some issues, don't get me wrong, but all of our problems? No way. It's simply not possible. And the only way that I think that they can achieve that instinctually, because no one's going to come out and say to them, hey, here's some reading material, sit down and go through this. And even if they did, they'd probably say, no, I'm kind of busy. Taxes are getting a bit tight and the economy is getting a bit worse. I don't have time to read some book on philosophy and understand these subjects well enough to have this open mind that I'm referring to here, right? So it's really the only option to just try to consider other ideas. It's almost like it's like a caveman way of building up your opinion on something, but it does seem to be pretty effective. I mean, I've met some people now that I consider much more intellectually well-rounded than I did a year or two ago, and all they really did was talk to people who aren't like them. And I don't think that that's a good way to actually reach the heights that humanity has reached in terms of philosophical advancements, but it's something. It definitely counts for something. And I'm really happy to see these people actually putting in that effort. It's good for them. Now, that said, how could we increase this literacy that I'm talking about in Canada? What would actually motivate that? Because that sort of literacy, it's not really worth that much in terms of monetary value. It's not worth that much in terms of, in fact, it's probably it's probably a negative if we're talking about dating value, like your value, your how attractive you are as a mate. Um, if you have knowledge about these subjects, you're probably going to be looked at as some kind of weirdo whenever you talk about something. It's like, that guy has the time to look at a subject like this and really think about it. Ugh, that's gross. I don't want to be around him or her. In that, on the flip side here, and there are some strange women who they learn about these things, and people look at them like, "What are you, crazy? You care about the collective physical and mental well-being of society?" As if that's some kind of horrible thing. Anyways, I want to wrap this up for now. Just a subject I wanted to talk about for a bit. It's interesting to me, and it's something that I need to work on myself. I understand that making this podcast and talking about this subject, it comes off as very condescending. Probably should. It is condescending. I'm basically saying that Canadians, they just don't know what they're talking about when it comes to all these subjects. And they've never tried to know what they're talking about. And they don't have the tools to find out what they're talking about. And their best effort at doing any of those things is just sort of listening more. I don't mean to be a doomer. Frankly, I think life is pretty good. And there's a reason we got here. I don't blame anyone for this. It would only hold us back longer to sit here and blame people for it. So, I'm talking about it, and I'm trying to figure out solutions. Hopefully I can come up with something else, and that will probably be the subject of the next podcast. See how that goes. Goodbye.